What's the worst heartbreak you've ever experienced? How did you get over it? Slow, arduous process of developing feelings for my best friend after it was too late, and then having to lose both the potential of a relationship and a deep friendship. It was particularly painful because we both loved each other, but at different and incompatible times. It took me years to get over it, largely because I held on to hope for so long. And he fanned the flames by coming back a couple times, but never chose to date me. What really helped me was to eventually block him for about a year. So I wasn't sitting there wondering, will today be the day he comes back? During this time I wrote a lot and developed my spiritual side, which eventually allowed me to forgive him and let him go. Also, it was really critical for me to really give myself permission to feel my heavy feelings, grief, anger, hurt, even well after I thought I should have been over it. I feel like we often hamstring ourselves by trying to put arbitrary timelines on our healing process. It will get better, but yes, it will suck for a while. You're right in the thick of it at 3 weeks. Hugs. Boyfriend of over 3 years who I lived with broke up with me when I was 26 and I was totally blindsided. I was super in love with him and thought we would get married. He was a textbook narcissist and I was majorly under his spell. Once we broke up and I let go of the idea of reconciling after about a week, I saw that he did me a massive favor by breaking up with me, but I still cried every day for a month after we split. I moved back in with my parents, which was embarrassing but ended up being a blessing. I was also going through some health issues at the time, which he was very dismissive of and would tell me to stop being a baby when I didn't feel well. I saw a doctor the day after we broke up, ended up being diagnosed with a fairly serious but treatable digestive disorder that was making me sick for over a year. All that being said, I kind of made self-care my job to heal myself from this loss. I threw myself into the task of making myself feel better physically, mentally, and emotionally. I followed my doctor's orders for resolving my health issue to a T. I dove into my yoga practice, I let my friends and family take care of me. I have a hard time accepting help from others. I painted my nails every week. I said yes to more social events with friends than I was inclined to, but the distraction and positive interaction was so good for me. The first month or 6 weeks was so hard. I wouldn't want to get up in the morning, but I had to go to work and keep living my life. I started dating again about 3 months later and dated a lot for about 2.5 years. No serious relationships, lots of first dates and a few men who I saw for a month. After living at home for 2 years, I moved back to the state where I went to college, changed careers, and met my husband, on Tinder, about 6 months after I moved. This summer will be the 7th anniversary of my breakup, and I wish I could tell heartbroken past self how many wonderful things are in store for her. I feel your pain and I promise it's not forever. ETA, I also cut off all contact with him once we had breakup logistics worked out, and I think that is the single best thing I did for myself. Blocked him on all social media, never called, texted or emailed ever again. He could be dead and I honestly wouldn't know. Now ex-husband left me for my, now ex-best friend. We had been together for 12 years, married for 9. He didn't serially cheat, his honesty and integrity were things I deeply loved about him. It devastated me. I felt like my entire world changed overnight, as well as my ability to trust myself to judge people. I got through it with the help of friends, 5 ladies in particular, an excellent therapist, and my mother. I am a very resilient person, which helped a lot as well. There were a couple of books in particular that I found very useful. Despite my anger each time I picked them up, why do I have to do all this work? He or she's the asshole. Namely, The Journey from Abandonment to Healing, Susan Anderson, and How Can I Forgive? Janice Spring. Talking with trusted people, journaling, being as open as I could be with others, and allowing people to support me. Through that, I learned that while I often saw myself as Joe Smith's wife, the opposite seemed to be true. So many people told me they liked my ex-husband well enough, but I was the reason they wanted to spend time with us. It really shifted my self-perception in a positive way. Through the whole process, I realized the value of trying to be a good person and trying to be the best version of myself at any given time. When all I had to fall back on was my character and how well I had developed and maintained my relationships, I had so much support and strength to get through the most traumatic experiences of my life. Edit, thank you for the gold. I was diagnosed with ovarian cancer. My ex ghosted me when I had surgery to remove the mass, and my dog died a week after I got home from the hospital. I now have my health, amazing friends and family, and a rescued dog who can always bring a smile to my face. I had a similar experience but minus the cancer. My IUD punctured my uterus and releases hormones into my body. I ended up having to have 25% of my uterus removed. I found out she was cheating on me a week later because she had hickeys on her neck that she claimed was from her shell necklace. I still roll my eyes at that. She then told me she hoped I would die on the surgery table. It's something that haunts my thoughts every time I go in for surgery. I now have a rescued pup who is my soulmate. Even was born on my birthday. I met my husband the day I graduated high school. My entire adult life was spent with him. We were together 28 years, had 4 kids, survived being in a homeless shelter with all of us crammed into one room, and I was looking forward to growing old with him. If there was nothing else I could count on us being together to get through whatever life threw at us. Last October, he had been complaining about severe pain in his upper back, and I finally convinced him to go to the emergency room. I called out sick from work and we drove to the hospital. I couldn't find the parking garage, having only had a vehicle for a short time and for having driven to that hospital before. He claimed he felt better, and honestly he looked better, so we went home and I went to work. When I got home around 6:15 the next morning, I found him dead. My 2 youngest kids were home at the time, but he was in the bedroom and they didn't realize anything was wrong. As for how I got through it, I can't answer that yet. I'm still going through it. Friday is my first birthday without him since we met, and then a little over a week after that is the 1-year anniversary of his death. I feel closer to falling apart now than I did when it happened. I guess I was in shock then and it didn't really register. Now, almost a year later, it keeps hitting me that this is real, that he won't ever be coming home again, that I have to do this on my own. I'll be okay eventually, I suppose, but right now I just don't want to be me. I went through a tough breakup, but it wasn't a long relationship. He played a lot of emotional games with me and it took a toll on my mental health. I was turning 30 and was freaked out because I wasn't married with kids yet. Time healed that wound and I look back and I am so thankful that relationship ended. I found out some stuff about him later on that made me happy that things didn't go work out or get too far. I feel a little embarrassed from time to time that I chose a bum like him, but that is nothing compared to what my life could have been. A man broke off an engagement right before Christmas by telling me he'd realize he didn't love me enough and wasn't attracted to me enough to marry me after all. I'm not attractive enough, both physically and otherwise, that I can go into a relationship without a very likely chance of him ditching me as soon as a better offer comes along. I made so many emotional and material sacrifices and compromises for that relationship, after letting myself be persuaded that I'd been wrong to assume I'd be single for life and that maybe I was good enough for the conventional happily ever after. Having to rebuild my life from the ground up, both materially and psychologically, after having lost everything, in my early 30s was devastating, and I'm in such a worse position, especially financially and materially, now than I would have been if I'd stick to my guns and stayed independent. I refuse to put myself through this again. It was hard enough rebuilding my life in my early 30s, it would be even worse doing it in my middle age or older. I prefer staying independent over risking my life again for romance. Heartbreaking breakups are the worst. I had a couple in my 20s and 30s that were so painful I would fantasize about being dead. Not that I would have done anything like that, but the thought of not being alive to experience the pain sounded kind of nice. I'm not aware of any quick fixes. Time will inevitably but slowly heal you. Supposedly cutting all contact speeds healing, but I'm not sure. A few things that did help me were, avoid wallowing in grief. A little is fine, but when I really sunk into it I just felt worse and worse. Help to get up and do something active that would take me out of that space. Focus on the future and what you want to create. Not to look back at the past with regret, but focus more on manifesting your new ideal future. Throwing myself into my career projects also helped. If you can reach that zone where you become so focused on your project that time flies by and you don't even think of anything else, it's a wonderful escape, and it feels so good to be productive and not depressed. Hugs to you. Me too. My worst breakup before this lasted nearly a year. I swore I'd never be such a mess again. Never be so broken and helpless over anybody again. But right now everything seems joyless and futile and horrible, and I'm constantly fighting not to cry. I wish I could just switch everything off for a long time. BFF breakup. It's been like 5 years and I still have a recurring dream of her in dire trouble, needing my help. Which tells you a lot about our friendship and why it couldn't last. I would say it's a slower, more persistent heartbreak than most, especially since I haven't had a new best friend to replace her. So, 5 years later, even though our friendship had become toxic, I still feel a gap in my life and in my heart for her, broken heart, which is hard to admit, as I usually get over heartbreak easily. Thanks for sharing. Friend heartbreaks are really tough to get over too. I'm sorry to hear your story, you're definitely not the only one. I watched my elderly cat decline over the last 2 years of her life. She was the reason I kept living and one of my worst sources of anxiety. Now she's been gone a few years. It still stings, but time in building a life worth living is a good buffer. I eventually learned what I did right and did wrong, which helped the most. I gave her everything I could at the time, and that's what matters. Really, my heartbreak is that I'm 31, single for years, and never been in actual love. Every time I get excited about a guy only for us to not be compatible, or he's not interested or he just ghosts me, my heart breaks more. Not meaning to sound so dramatic, my first big love / cohabitation / moved cities, etc. relationship of 5 years. I believe it was so hard because I'd yet to fully grieve the loss of my mom. My dad died while I was with him, and I really considered him my family. In a way, it turned out he did not. Anyway, this will probably suck to hear, but really it was just time that eventually healed that heartbreak. I also did all the things, felt my feelings, leaned heavily on friends, buried myself in my work / hobbies, got a hot revenge breakup body. I know these things helped, but it was time that was most needed. You'll get there, I promise. My best friend at the time, several years ago now, broke off our friendship because, essentially, she had a history with people pulling away from her and thought I was doing that. I was just in college and working a job, so I was busy, so she wanted to do it before I did it to her. It really messed me up and I cried so much. It was also something I internalized about myself. I'm not good enough for a friendship, people will leave me, etc., because I didn't know at the time why she had done it. We got to talk again years later and closed that chapter, but I still have those lingering thoughts just cemented. It's definitely gotten easier over time and with some therapy, not just for that but in general. My BFF essentially broke up with me. She chose to believe her husband over me, and it sucked. It still sucks. We had plans to raise our kids together and be overly involved in each other's lives. I can't help but wonder if I did enough to save the friendship. I dream a lot about her. And it kills me still. My